13 years the trucks rolled in every Thursday, punctual as a train at 7:30, sometimes earlier, never much later. The drivers never lingered. They pulled up to the fence, tipped the dump beds, emptied heaps of rough-cut white oak, and vanished back toward the lumber yard. Most assumed Margaret Hale despised those arrivals. She didn't. Each delivery sparked possibility. Their peculiar pact began in 1992. Margaret had just inherited 85 acres from her grandfather, Samuel Hale. The land bordered the county lumber yard. For years, the mill grappled with a stubborn issue: short offcuts, warped slats, live-edge remnants, wide pieces too precious to burn yet too irregular for standard lumber sales. Dumping them cost money. Burning them squandered hardwood. One drenching afternoon, the yard manager knocked on Margaret's door. He peeled off his cap. Afternoon. Margaret smiled, gesturing him inside. He pointed past the fence. "We've got a question." Silence stretched. "What kind?" He scratched his neck. "Mind if we dump oak behind your north pasture?" Margaret frowned. "Why, we're paying to haul it away." A long pause. "So," he shrugged, "if you've got room." Margaret surveyed the pasture. The rear corner lay dormant, rocky and poorly drained, rarely visited. "How much?" The manager chuckled. "More than you'd believe." Margaret grinned. "Fine." Neither grasped the shift in their 20-year path. The first truck rumbled in Thursday, then another the next week, then another. The mounds grew. Most pieces seemed useless, skewed, uneven, odd lengths, bark clinging to surfaces. Neighbors dismissed them as junk. Others deemed them firewood. Samuel saw something else. One evening, Margaret trailed him to the expanding piles. He lifted a thick white oak slab, his palm gliding along the grain, then beamed. "Pretty." Margaret laughed. "This?" Samuel nodded. "Most beautiful board here." She looked again. "Rough, ungainly, flawed. What do you see?" Samuel angled the slab toward the sun. Golden rays revealed swirling grain hidden beneath the rough hide. "Furniture." Margaret scowled. "Nobody could craft with that." Samuel chuckled. The tree had already done the hard work. Those words endured her life. After Samuel died, Margaret inherited more than land. A woodworking shed, vintage hand planes, cabinet makers' chisels, woodworking tomes, and dozens of notebooks filled with furniture designs, drying techniques, joinery insights, finishing methods, everything. One phrase echoed repeatedly: "Straight boards build houses. Interesting boards build heirlooms." Margaret read it endlessly. At first it felt lyrical. Soon it shaped her strategy. The lumber trucks kept coming every Thursday. The oak heap swelled. Folks ribbed her constantly. One Saturday at the diner, Dale Harper watched Margaret's truck approach. "There she is." Rick glanced up. "The lumber lady?" Dale nodded. "The junk collector." Laughter bubbled around the table, not malicious, merely comfortable. The sort reserved for folks everyone thought they'd unraveled. A farmer asked, "How much firewood you got now?" Margaret smiled. "Too much," Dale chuckled. "You planning to heat the county?" A pause. "No." "What then?" Margaret gazed toward the hills. "Tables." The table erupted, louder this time. "Tables. From scrap." "Those crooked boards," Margaret merely nodded. "No one bought it. She'd never crafted furniture, never run a shop, never advertised yet." The following winter, Margaret reopened Samuel's journals. Each evening she practiced pin-cut dovetails, mortise and tenon joints, tabletop glue-ups. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The first table looked dreadful. The second slightly less so. The third nearly level. By the 15th, something shifted. The grain, the character, the live edges everyone labeled flaws transformed into allure. Margaret ceased seeing waste. She began seeing narratives. One evening her brother Nathan wandered into the workshop, floor littered with wood shavings. Half-finished tables leaned against every wall. He halted, studied, then laughed. "You're doing it again." Margaret looked up. "What?" "The workshop." Silence. "The workshop." Nathan grinned. "That means you're obsessed." A pause, then "Probably." He lifted a finished tabletop, his fingers tracing the smooth oak. "This came from the pile." Margaret nodded. "Thursday's delivery." Nathan glanced toward the fence. "I'd have burned it, I know. Spring brought the county craft fair." Margaret snagged the tiniest booth available. One dining table, 2 benches, nothing else. People marveled, complimented, touched the grain, inquired. No one bought. The drive home felt hollow. Nathan tried to cheer her. "They liked them." Margaret sighed. "They didn't buy them." He shrugged. "They remembered them." She wasn't convinced. The second fair yielded one sale. A retired couple bought a dining table, insisting on cash. Margaret loaded it into their trailer herself. As they drove off, she watched quietly, not for the money but for the first time someone craved something she'd built. Orders trickled in slowly, very slowly. One table, then another, then another. Restaurants sought larger pieces. A bed and breakfast ordered 6. A local winery requested tasting room furniture. Margaret never promoted. Every order arrived via referrals. Reputation spread gently, exactly how she preferred. Meanwhile, the lumber trucks kept arriving every Thursday. The piles never seemed to shrink. Each load held another future tabletop, another bench, another chance. One humid July afternoon, a furniture designer touring the area stopped at the winery. He studied one of Margaret's oak tables for nearly 20 minutes. Then he asked the owner, "Who made this?" The owner smiled, "Local woman." "Can I meet her?" 3 days later, the designer wandered Margaret's workshop. He paced slowly, inspecting stacks of slats, drying racks, finished pieces, everything. He spoke little. Eventually he paused beside a completed dining table, both hands sweeping across the grain, then smiling. "This isn't scrap wood." Margaret crossed her arms. "I know." The designer eyed the massive oak piles beyond the fence, then back again. "You have enough material here for years." Margaret nodded. "Probably." A pause, then the question that would reshape everything. "Have you ever considered selling outside the county?" The query lingered in Margaret's mind all week. Have you ever considered selling outside the county? Until then, she'd never taken it seriously. The workshop kept her busy enough. Every table sold before she finished the next. Restaurants referred her. Lodges ordered matching sets. Families waited months for custom pieces. Business felt steady, peaceful. The designer circled the workshop again. Stacks of drying oak lined one wall. Finished tabletops leaned carefully against another. Outside, another truck from the lumber yard backed to the familiar spot. The driver waved. Margaret waved back. The designer smiled. "You know, most companies pay thousands for lumber like this." Margaret looked toward the new pile. "I've never paid $1. He laughed softly. "That's exactly why you should think bigger." A month later, he invited Margaret to a regional furniture exhibition. At first she declined. Then Nathan persuaded her. "You've got nothing to lose." She hoisted 3 dining tables onto a borrowed trailer. One farmhouse design, one modern live edge piece, one traditional trestle table. Every creation came from what others called scrap. The exhibition hall felt intimidating. Massive furniture companies dominated with professional lighting, elegant branding, sales teams. Margaret's booth held 3 tables, a folding chair, and a handwritten sign. She expected little. Instead, people kept stopping. Not because of the sign, but because of the wood. Visitors ran fingers across flowing grain. They studied natural edges, asked about the oak's origin. Margaret always replied the same. "Behind my fence." Most assumed she was joking. By day's end, all 3 tables sold. By the second day, she collected enough business cards to fill an entire notebook. Interior designers, boutique hotels, restaurant owners, architects. One buyer finally asked, "Can you produce more?" Margaret hesitated. "I think so." The next year transformed everything. She expanded the workshop, not into a factory, but into a larger craftsmanship studio. 3 local woodworkers joined her, then 2 more. Young artisans who preferred building furniture to framing houses. Every Thursday, the lumber trucks still arrived. Only now the piles vanished almost as quickly as they appeared. One afternoon, the lumber yard manager stopped by. He watched employees sorting fresh white oak, then laughed. "You know," Margaret looked up. "What? We used to pay thousands monthly to discard this." She smiled. "I remember." He shook his head. "And now we're delivering your inventory." Margaret laughed. "Looks that way." County remained puzzled, at least publicly. People noticed more workers, more trailers, more deliveries, assuming Margaret simply maintained a busy hobby. The nickname shifted. She was no longer the junk collector. Now she was the table lady. Jokes persisted. One Saturday at the diner, Dale Harper watched another trailer loaded with finished furniture roll by. "There goes another table," Rick laughed. "How many people need tables?" Margaret happened to walk in just then. Dale smiled. "Business good." Margaret nodded. "Very. Still making tables from garbage." "Still," he laughed. "I'll never understand it." Margaret smiled politely. "You don't have to." 2 years later, a photographer from a national home design magazine visited the workshop. He spent an entire afternoon capturing furniture, oak piles, hand tools, old drying sheds. He loved the story almost as much as the furniture. When the article published, something unexpected occurred. Design blogs picked it up, then interior designers, then furniture buyers nationwide. Emails arrived faster than Margaret could answer them. Waiting lists stretched to 8 months. Nathan entered the office carrying another stack of orders. He dropped them on the desk. "You're going to need help." Margaret studied the pile. "I know, lots of help," she smiled. "I know." The biggest surprise came 6 months later. An executive from a nationally recognized furniture retailer requested a visit. Margaret nearly declined. She assumed someone else would manage accounts that size. Instead, a small team arrived at the workshop one rainy Tuesday morning. They spent hours touring every building, examining joinery, watching sanding, studying finishing methods. Finally, the lead buyer paused beside one massive white oak dining table. He rested both hands on the surface, closed his eyes briefly, then smiled. "This is exactly what we're looking for." Margaret stayed quiet. Buyer continued, "We're launching a collection built around authentic American craftsmanship." A pause. "We'd like your tables to be part of it." Silence filled the workshop. Nathan looked at Margaret. Margaret glanced beyond the window at the giant oak piles, then back again. "You're serious?" The buyer smiled. "Very." Negotiations dragged on for months. Margaret insisted on keeping production local. No overseas manufacturing, no particle board, no veneers, solid American white oak, hand-finished. The retailer agreed. Orders began the following spring. For the first time, dining tables born from discarded oak behind Margaret's fence appeared in elegant furniture showrooms nationwide. The county remained in the dark, not until one Saturday. Dale Harper and his wife shopped for furniture in the city. They wandered a home furnishing store. His wife halted abruptly. "Dale." "What?" she pointed. "No," he frowned. "What?" The display featured a massive live-edge white oak dining table under sophisticated lighting. A small plaque listed the maker, Margaret Hale Workshop. Dale approached, read it, then read it again. "No," his wife smiled. "I think that's your table, lady." The drive home felt unusually quiet. Monday morning the diner buzzed earlier than usual. Dale carried a furniture catalog beneath his arm. He placed it on the breakfast counter. Rick looked up. "What now?" Dale opened the catalog. Beautiful photographs covered the pages. Centered within Margaret's dining table. The room fell silent. Someone finally whispered, "She built that." Dale nodded slowly. "From the lumber piles." By lunchtime the entire county knew. That afternoon, the lumber yard manager delivered another truckload of white oak. This time several employees climbed down first. They stood quietly, gazing toward the workshop. Machines hummed inside. Craftsmen carefully assembled another dining table. Forklifts moved carefully stacked slabs. Finished furniture awaited shipment. One employee shook his head. "We've been throwing away a furniture business for 13 years. The manager smiled. "Looks like we have." One autumn evening, Nathan stood beside Margaret, overlooking the property. The familiar oak piles still stretched behind the north fence, smaller now but never gone. Beyond them, the expanded workshop buzzed. Delivery trucks loaded finished furniture. Employees locked up for the evening. The scent of fresh-cut white oak drifted through cool air. Nathan folded his arms. "You know what still bothers me?" Margaret smiled. "What? They called it junk." "Yes, for years, yes." He glanced at the workshop. They laughed. Margaret nodded. "I know." Long silence settled over the farm. Finally Nathan asked, "So what did Grandpa actually see?" Margaret lifted a rough oak slab from the newest delivery. Bark clung to edges which twisted unnaturally. Most would still call it firewood. She turned it toward the fatting sun. Golden rays illuminated spectacular swirling grain beneath the rough surface. Exactly as Samuel had done years before. She smiled. He saw the table hiding inside the tree. For 13 years the lumber yard believed it was paying to dispose of waste. The county assumed Margaret Hale collected scrap. Neighbors saw firewood, crooked boards, worthless cutoffs. Margaret saw something entirely different. Possibility, patience, craftsmanship. Every Thursday another truck backed up to the fence and unloaded what everyone else had rejected. One board at a time. One table at a time. One customer at a time. until the wood once destined for the landfill became handcrafted dining tables admired across the country. Because sometimes the greatest value isn't found in discovering better materials. It's forged by seeing what everyone else has already decided isn't worth seeing.